Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Michael Meyer with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, an overview of the Draft Controls Enabled LED Retrofit Kit Program Performance Specification, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy's Better Buildings Program. The focus of today's webinar is related to the LED retrofit kits for many common types of light fixtures. The draft specification was posted online in January and sent out to many different parties for feedback. This webinar is another part of the feedback process. At this time, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Felipe Leon, and then he'll continue the presentation after I've done his introduction. We're very happy to have Felipe Leon of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory as our speaker today. Felipe Leon is an electrical engineer with 16 years of experience in concept and product development, project management, and test engineering. He's been with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory since 2014, supporting Department of Energy's solid-state lighting program on various projects. Prior to working at PNL, Felipe worked at Eastman Kodak Company and Moser Baer Technologies, where he worked on both light-emitting diode and organic light-emitting diode technology. Felipe holds a Bachelor of Science from Florida International University. And Felipe, please continue your presentation.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction, and thanks everyone again for calling into the webinar on the Controls Enabled LED Retrofit Performance Specification Draft. Here are some key highlights of what we'll be covering during today's webinar. We'll start out with a background as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, including why we've chosen retrofit kits for this specification. We'll then get into the goals for the specification from a building owner or manager's perspective, and also from a manufacturer's or distributor's perspective. In the draft specification highlights section, I'll cover some of the more important aspects of the specification, such as characteristics of the product and the performance metrics that we use. I'll wrap up with a section on how you can help, and yes, everyone on this call can help us with this process. As Michael has noted, there's time for questions at the end, but please don't wait till the end to send in your questions. Now for a little background. Better Buildings is an initiative of the U.S. Department of Energy launched in 2011. It is designed to improve the lives of American people by driving leadership in energy innovation. Today, the initiative represents over 250 partners and allies across various sectors, and that includes 3.5 billion square feet of space. Through Better Buildings, DOE partners with leaders in the public and private sectors to make the nation's homes, commercial buildings, and industrial plants more energy efficient by accelerating investment and sharing of successful best practices. With the goal of making buildings 20% more efficient in 10 years, the initiative hopes to save U.S. organizations more than $80 billion in energy costs while creating American jobs. Better Buildings does this through various ways, including best practice models, recognition, and catalyzing action. Some of these methods you'll see applied in the specification and in the interior lighting campaign. One of the biggest motivators, along with interest from Better Buildings members, is the success of the high-efficiency troffer performance specification, which was introduced back in 2011. By adopting the specification today, building owners may observe energy savings of roughly 50% over legacy products and up to 80% when controls are applied. The troffer specification was designed as a best practices guidance and has gone through a few revisions as the technology has progressed, with today's specification requiring a performance level of 125 lumens per watt. This has helped to ensure that building owners have the most current information when specifying these products, and that they are considering products that will result in energy savings and reliable performance. So what is the reason for developing a retrofit kit specification? If you're a building owner today, you're likely faced with two extremes when it comes to taking advantage of the energy savings afforded by new LED technology. On the one hand, you have type A, or we'll call them plug-and-play LED tubes, that offer the quickest and cheapest way to save energy. However, limitations on control compatibility or availability and leaving the valves in place essentially leave energy savings on the table. Furthermore, for a system that is looking a bit worn, you're left with a system that's still looking a bit worn. Replacing the entire luminaire, on the other hand, provides for the best energy savings control options and longest life, as they are essentially designed for optimum performance. With some luminaire lifetime claims in the 100,000-hour range, they can essentially be considered maintenance-free. However, first cost is sometimes a barrier that needs to be overcome. Enter retrofit kits. Retrofit kits essentially use the shell of the existing luminaire, gutting the lamps and much of the existing electronics with new light engines and drivers instead of ballast in place. Retrofit kit can provide greater energy savings and controllability than plug-and-play LED tubes. Here on the slide, you can see some of the components that may be included in a retrofit kit. I should note that not all components will necessarily be included in any given retrofit kit, but this slide shows some of the key components, including an LED light engine, which replaces the existing lamps, an LED driver, which replaces the fluorescent lamp ballast, and some sensors that may be integrated into the luminaire or the retrofit kit components. Some diffusers may be included to eliminate the glare of LEDs, as well as some side panels that provide a new appearance to the luminaire. So in summarizing the benefits of retrofit kits over plug-and-play TLEDs, they can provide for a refreshed look to a worn luminaire, provide new electronics, and enable various control options. Various tools exist to help determine whether TLEDs, retrofit kits, or luminaires may be the best choice depending on your criteria. On the right of this slide here, you'll see an example from the Department of Energy, a report that considers the conditions of the sockets, interior surfaces, lens or louvers, and whether there are any restrictions in accessing the space above the ceiling. There are other similar graphs that can help you determine, depending on whether you want control or some other requirements of your particular project. As noted, retrofit kits can enable you to take advantage of control techniques that can lead to additional energy savings. These can include occupancy and daylight sensing, as well as dimming. Sensors may be integrated into the retrofit kit, saving money by reducing the need for wiring and facilitating their application. Advanced controls are also possible due to the fact that new drivers and electronics are being installed with the retrofit kit, such as visible light communication, among others. So a recent Caliper snapshot report evaluated over 46,000 active products categorized as troffer luminaires and retrofit kits. And it found that 56% had luminous efficacy above 100 lumen per watt. This level is greater than the maximum fluorescent troffers. And it also found that about 10% exceeded 125 lumen per watt. The report also found that the retrofit kit product efficacy and output ranges were very similar to the listed troffer luminaires. In this whisker plot, you may observe that troffer retrofit kits average 112 lumen per watt, while troffers average 102 lumen per watt. The report found that this occurs in part due to the presence of luminaires on the DLC database prior to 2014, which is the point when retrofit kit designation first became available on the DLC. The plot also compares the troffer and retrofit kits to other product types, including TLEDs and linear and industrial fixtures. The latter two represent product types into which some of the retrofit kits we're targeting with the specification may be used. As can be seen, the average efficacy for those types of fixtures are on par with troffers and troffer retrofit kits. Though it can be observed that some industrial fixtures can have a very high efficacy exceeding 200 lumen per watt, the top part of that whisker. To wrap up this section, which is why retrofit kits. One of the main reasons for developing this specification is based on requests from BBA members who have used the troffer spec in the past and wish to have a similar retrofit kit specification as guidance to help them identify and install candidate products. What do we seek to accomplish with this specification? Unlike the troffer specification, which is a best practices guidance, the retrofit kit specification aims to drive new product development that provides top-notch efficacy and maximizes the use or availability of energy-saving controls. Through this, the specification will provide value to the customer by providing a return on their investment through both energy savings and also through the innovative use of controls and communication. This specification will be leveraged by various programs, such as by Better Buildings members, who would adopt it and apply it, creating a pool for retrofit kits that meet the specification. by the Interior Lighting Campaign, which would promote its use, assist with its application, recognize and report on exemplary projects, and evaluate compliant products in demonstration projects. And by Next Generation Lighting Systems, which is considering a competition leveraging aspects of the specification to recognize retrofit kits. In general, through the specification, it is hoped that there can be an increased acceptance of retrofit kits as viable candidates for fixture upgrades through education and awareness, documentation such as case studies, and by creating that comfort level for building owners based on a body of knowledge on the application of retrofit kits. I'll now cover some of the key highlights of the draft specification. As a reminder, these highlights are not all-inclusive, and I encourage you to review the specification in full and provide comments and data on the content. Also, comments regarding support, level of interest, desire to apply it, and other such comments are welcomed, and I'll provide information on how to provide those comments. So the key sections I'll be covering here are related to scope and application, performance, sensors and controls, and lastly, installation. For the purpose of this specification, LED retrofit kits intended for troffer, linear ambient, low bay, and high bay luminaires all fall within scope. Their application may be in recessed ceilings, they may be surface mounted, or even suspended. Some common types of luminaires may include lensed, parabolic, strip style, and wrap style, though these are not all inclusive of the variety of luminaires that are out there that would fit under this specification. With respect to performance, retrofit kits will be expected to have a power factor of greater than 0.9 and a total harmonic distortion of less than 20%. This is very typical in many of the luminaires that have been observed, as well as retrofit kits. A lifetime of 75,000 hours to L70, that's at the 70% of the original light output level. And an optional reporting of the lifetime at 50,000 hours at L90, which is the level at which the retrofit kit will get to 90% of its initial light output. It would also be expected to have a 7-year warranty. And with respect to color, the color rendering index has been the typical way to provide a representative description of the ability to reproduce colors with a given light source. The requirement here is that an average value of 80 color rendering index be achieved, and that an R9 that is positive be achieved. Recently, a TM30 method of providing color rendition values, which include fidelity, gamut, and color saturation aspects, has also been developed and has been released. And for fidelity greater than or equal to 75 would be expected, and gamut of 95, and color saturation value of -8% would be required. As it relates to efficacy and light output, retrofit kits may be designed to have a fixed correlated color temperature, or CCT, for example, 3500 Kelvin. Or they may be designed to have an adjustable CCT to allow the user to adjust the look and feel of the space. This table shows the expected performance of the fixed CCT retrofit kits. The minimum light output is dependent on the category of the luminaire into which the retrofit kit is intended. For example, troffer, linear ambient, low bay, or high bay. For troffers, the value is dependent on the area, while for linear ambient luminaires, it is dependent on the linear length. For low bay and high bay, the minimum light output values are stated in the table. Again, these are minimum light outputs, and the actual light output for any given space will take various factors into consideration. The minimum luminaire efficacy has been set at 140 lumen per watt across the board, and some aspects of light distribution are covered by the zonal lumen density and spacing criteria shown in the last two columns. The potential energy savings is clear when comparing these efficacy levels to typical commercial and industrial fixtures ranging from 50 to 80 lumen per watt, as shown below. For tunable white products, which have been observed to have some benefits in certain applications, this table provides the minimum initial light output and luminaire efficacy. In general, lower efficacies are observed for lower CCTs, and this table provides an allowance for slightly lower light output and efficacies at the minimum CCT to take this into account, relative to 3500 Kelvin. For higher CCTs, higher efficacies are typically observed, and this table shows a slightly higher efficacy at the max CCT. Since some manufacturers may choose to maintain a fixed light output at the higher CCT and bank it as saved energy, the minimum light output at max CCT is the same as the level at 3500 Kelvin. Light distribution requirements are the same as those for fixed CCT products and are thus not shown here. For the purpose of this specification, the retrofit kits are required to have dual-tech occupancy sensors, daylight sensors, and be capable of being dimmed. We're also considering having Sniffer or tracking and sensor network capabilities as being available on request. In other words, not installed by default. Option controls include visible light communication, among others. And at this point, we will now conduct a quick poll targeted to manufacturers of retrofit kits and utility and energy efficiency organizations. If you do not fall into either of these two categories, please select NA or select one of the options to move on. These results will not be shared publicly, but you will provide us meaningful information in the development of the specification. What I can share is that most utilities and efficiency organizations that register for this webinar noted that they offer incentives for LE retrofit kits. The question posed in this poll is related to whether a higher incentive may be offered for products that meet this specification. So to the energy efficiency organizations and utilities, please note that in particular, if you're already offering an incentive, the question here is related to, would you offer a greater incentive when you're able to achieve this level of performance? So moving on, another aspect of retrofit kits is the need for labor to both remove the various existing components, such as the lamps and ballast, as well as installing new components and rewiring these. This will likely require a qualified electrician for at least some portion of the installation. So installation time and guidance is an important part of the specification. As such, the specification requires that a manufacturer provide documentation including a compatibility list containing luminaire models or types where the retrofit kits are known to fit, the tools that will be required for installation that are not included with the kit, step-by-step instructions to complete the installation, and the installation time required by an experienced installer from first touch to last. We've observed that some manufacturers go above and beyond the call of duty to make the retrofitting process as easy as possible for their customers. They sometimes provide videos showing the retrofitting process, have tips or frequently asked questions in documentation or on their website, and may even provide on-demand support such as installer hotlines or training that can be provided by experienced installers. These are all optional installation guidance and support in this specification. So how can you help with this process? So what we're asking is that you feed into the process by reviewing version 0.12 of the draft and sharing any general comments or providing specific feedback and data. My contact information is shown on this slide. It's also shown on the Interior Lighting Campaign website, where you may already have seen this. And I'll also put it up again at the end of the presentation during the Q&A portion. Industry members are asked to stay informed of the specification as it develops and finalizes, and manufacturers in particular can help by identifying or developing products that meet the specification and letting us know about them. More on that in a second. Building owners and managers can help by considering retrofit kits as a viable solution, providing general comments in this specification, and applying the final specification to projects where retrofit kits are to be considered. This slide presents some key dates coming up regarding the retrofit kit specification. I encourage everyone to submit comments, whether they are related to the specification being proposed or the usefulness of having such a specification. Please submit your comments by March 17th, and I'll have the details coming up. Based on and informed by the comments received, we'll release a final specification by mid-April. After release of the specification, manufacturers are encouraged to review their product portfolio to determine whether they have a qualifying product or if one may be modified to serve as a qualifying prototype. The deadline to express an intent to submit a product is May 19th. An intent to submit form will be available on the Interior Lighting Campaign website. On May 31st, manufacturers having expressed an intent to submit will be informed whether their products are eligible and will be considered for further evaluation and demos. Manufacturers can submit their eligible products by July 28th. An entry form and checklist will be provided to the manufacturers that were notified on May 31st as having eligible products. Qualifying products will be selected by August 31st to participate in DOE-supported demonstration projects to evaluate in-field performance. So the next steps. Please take the next steps of reviewing the specification and submitting your comments by March 17th. You can review the specification at interiorlightingcampaign.org/draft-retrofit-kit, and the comments are due by March 17th. As I've mentioned quite a few times, the best way to stay informed is through joining the Interior Lighting Campaign or going to the Interior Lighting Campaign website. The link is at the bottom of this slide. Also, while you're there, if you or your clients have any projects that have been recently completed, and we're actually looking for projects back to 2013, I encourage you to submit them for recognition. Our April 3rd deadline to submit is fast approaching, but our process to submit is fairly simple, and we'd be happy to help you with that. This year, we'll be awarding troffer projects, but we have now rolled suspended linear luminaires as well as low bay and high bay luminaires into the campaign, and we'll be recognizing them in the next year. Lastly, I'd like to thank you for your time and for helping us out with this process by taking the next steps. Now for Q&A, and anyone shy about asking anything here, if you haven't done throughout this presentation, please feel free to contact me also directly. My email and my contact number are listed on this slide. But I'd like to turn over control to Mr. Michael Meyer, who will moderate the Q&A portion of this webinar.
Thanks, Felipe. We received a number of different questions, and I've tried to grab them and group them where they make the most amount of sense. Unfortunately, there's a mechanism. Someone had a comment, and I'm being asked to share it verbally. We have no way of unmuting specific people. In terms of other key dates that is helpful to know, the Department of Energy's Better Building Program, which is ultimately a sponsor of this specification, is having a Better Building Summit in the DC area. And during the summit, which is in the second week of May, May 15th through the 17th, there will be a session for manufacturers. This is actually, the idea is kind of trying to partner lighting manufacturers with members of the Better Buildings retail, food, service, and grocery partners about their product needs and energy management. This was born out of those end users of those type of facilities who were saying, you know, they have some certain needs, and they were trying to work directly with manufacturers beyond just salespeople, but more also with the product development side of the teams to address certain products that they're looking for. And they'd like to actually say, hey, here's a real problem we have, and hear feedback and how it could potentially be addressed from manufacturers. So that's available. I'm searching for the exact date on it. I don't think it's in front of me at the moment, but we'll definitely, if you reach out to us, we can definitely share it with you, or we'll try to announce it through our many different communication channels. I'm going to just jump into the questions here. There is no particular order, but where possible, I have tried to group them. First, what is this a voluntary specification or a mandatory specification?
Thank you, Michael. Regarding the use of the specification, It is voluntary, and it's partially driven by end users seeking certain performance levels and other characteristics. The Better Buildings members, we are basically providing them a tool that they can use, and this can just be one tool among others, and they may also make minor modifications depending on their space needs. For example, they might need a little bit more light output than the minimum light output, and they might specify that in more detail than what this specification provides. So what we're really doing here is providing a voluntary tool available to Better Building members or anybody else that wants to use this as a starting point to get that conversation started, so they can at least consider retrofit kits.
Oh, good. Thank you. Moving into more of the technical specifications related to lighting controls, these were a couple of questions kind of grouped together, and this is the best way to summarize it. First, an end user or person on the webinar had a question of what does dual technology mean related to occupancy sensors? And a related question is, what's the rationale for dual tech? This person suggests that ultrasonic tends to use more power and has limited benefit in commercial spaces with high sensor density. So if you could, again, first explain a little more about dual technology, and then second, provide some of the rationale and some of the feedback there.
Right. So we are synchronizing a little bit with the troffer specification that requires dual technology. But in essence, it provides multiple ways of sensing the motion within a space, and allows for less convenient occurrences where a luminaire is going off when it shouldn't be. For example, if you have ceilings for example, if you have spaces where you have certain sections that are cut off and you cannot see motion, a dual technology would allow you to still recognize that there is somebody in the space.
Okay. I'm putting you here on the spot a little bit. Do we know exactly how much the increased power and related energy use would be from ultrasonic, or do you think that would be a welcome feedback point from people of if they could provide that salient data point?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Michael. I think that if there is a significant amount of power that is consumed by using dual tech versus just a single technology, I think that we would certainly look at that information and see if it is something that we should consider in refining the specification. Again, this is a draft specification, and we're looking for all the data that allows us to make an informed final version of the specification. And to the degree that we can do that, we can also synchronize down the road the troffer specification, taking that into consideration.
Great. Okay, moving beyond occupancy sensors into now color quality metrics. Again, grouping these in the best way we can. One person asks, is RA the same as CRI? Another person says, why a positive R9 and what is R9? And then ultimately the other question asked about CRI seems very high. How does that affect efficacy? So if you could kind of touch base on CRI, R9, and those characteristics.
Absolutely, Michael. I'm going back to the slide there. So CRI of 80, or RA, which is the average R value that is measured, are equivalent. And what you really have when you take a measurement of color rendering index is you have multiple blocks on a Macbeth chart that are reproduced, and you figure out how close did you reproduce that color. So there's actually an R1 to R, if I'm not mistaken, R9 or R12, and there's some additional blocks there that are also measured. R9 in particular is the red. You might know precisely.
Please, I'm sorry. I need to interrupt for a second. Can you advance on the webinar side back to the slide so we can see it? At the moment, the webinar, I think it would be helpful for everybody to get to see the colors.
Certainly. So I have it right up here. The Macbeth color chart you can see here. Yep. So the R9 actually refers to, if you look at about the third row, third column there, you'll see a red. It's a saturated red, and the capability to reproduce that color in particular is what is referred to as R9. And what happens with in particular phosphor converted LEDs is that the red content may be lacking, and you're not able to reproduce those deep, rich reds as well. which can also influence a little bit some of the skin tone colors. Now, with respect to the level being high, an RA of 80 is actually pretty much mainstream these days. I think a lot of people are looking at high color renderings to be more in the range of CRI of 90 or even 95 or higher. With respect to R9, it is also being greater than 0 is very achievable today, and most products that are out there are easily able to achieve this. That being said, when we do get into products that if you're a specifier and you're saying, well, I want the best color reproduction in the world, I want an RA of 90, I want one of 95, 99, there are some trade-offs. The higher you go in color rendering, the more likely it is that you won't be able to achieve high efficacies. So it is a energy versus color rendition trade-off that you have to deal with. So really understanding your need to reproduce the colors is important. Where you're in maybe a graphical environment where you need that, you may be willing to trade off the energy for getting that better color reproduction. Thanks, Michael.
No problem. Great explanation. Thank you. Moving back into the sensor technology realm, and I'm not surprised by this question because I think it's a funny term. Can you please clarify what the Sniffer technology is and what it is capable of doing?
Okay. It's a term that, yes, I think a lot of us don't particularly like the word sniffer, but as I mentioned, it's kind of a tracking technology, and if you do a search on some major organizations that are using tracking of cell phones, for example, it's a way to basically create an understanding of what traffic is within your space, your environment. In retail applications in particular, it would be useful to some of the Better Buildings members to know where people are trafficking, so they can, one, maybe choose to dim the lights, two, maybe rearrange their merchandise based on what's getting traffic and what isn't, or three, recognize what products are really people really looking at to see maybe they should put a sale on things like that. So Sniffer technology is geared at trying to smell out or kind of get a sense for traffic within an environment. It can be done, one, through motion sensors, but of course, two, your cell phones are constantly emitting a Wi-Fi seek signal, and there's also ways to identify your location using that within a retail environment. So that's what Sniffer technology is really geared at, is trying to provide some of the Better Building members new ways to help them understand their traffic and their environment in their store.
Great. Yeah, I agree. That term is kind of off-putting, and I think also beyond just people, I know some people are looking, or some organizations are looking at it for retail or inventory management and using RFID tags on certain inventory devices. So yeah, it's an interesting non-lighting technology that is gaining more popularity. Moving beyond that question related to Sniffer technology, a couple questions related to the existing equipment. This is more of a statement, but I think we can make it a question. It may be difficult in many cases to identify the existing troffer manufacturer and specification. Also, how do I know what my distribution is? So I guess the larger question there is, if someone has an existing equipment, how do they know what the proper way to retrofit it is with the amount of light output and possibly distribution? And we'll also come back on another question related to compatibility. So how do we handle existing equipment and that type of thing?
Right. So that is an excellent point, Michael. And what I'd like to say here is that while we provide a specific light distribution as a minimum requirement, each particular space has its own individual needs for how that light is distributed. For example, you might have a requirement for uplight. That means a certain percent of light in your typical fluorescent fixture is actually going upward because the fluorescent lamps are omnidirectional. That might be a requirement that you still have after this, and LEDs we know to be directional. So that is something that we don't capture here, but it is something that is a refinement that lighting specifier, that building owner has to be specific and say, look, I really want my replacement, my retrofit kit, to have 7%, 10% uplight as part of the specification. So those are places where you might make a refinement to the specification, but we're not able to cover every single space, every single scenario. So what we provided is just a typical what is required, and it's very well synchronized with the DesignLife Consortium requirements.
Okay, so that dovetails into the DesignLife Consortium questions. So a couple of questions is, one is, what is the plan to differentiate this from DLC rebate requirements? Also related to, is this related for consistency and compatibility in areas such as efficacy and controls related to the DesignLife Consortium?
Okay, great question. We are not trying to compete with the DesignLife Consortium. We are just hoping to provide a tool for building owners and lighting specifiers to use, or just to give them a starting point. The DesignLife Consortium maintains a database. As I mentioned earlier, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of products. And for example, utilities and energy efficiency organizations, when they're determining whether or not to provide an incentive to a luminaire or a retrofit kit or even a TLED, they're saying at a minimum you need to be listed on the DesignLife Consortium as a qualified product. That gives them a lot of assurances about the quality of the product, the performance of the product, and the fact that there will be some energy savings in the end because it has a minimum required efficacy. So we do not plan on maintaining a database such as the DesignLife Consortium does. We do plan on compiling some of the qualifying products and doing some demos, and also maybe maintaining a list of those when we're asked, what are some of the ones that meet this specification. But we are certainly not setting up a database at this time with the qualifying products. I'm sorry, not the qualifying, but the products that meet this specification.
Okay, good to know about how it relates with other programs out there that are complementary. Moving, again, I apologize for the way these questions are kind of organized. Moving now back from a high-level point of view more to a specific point of view related to life. Two related questions. One is, this gets into some technical requirements here. The TM21 specification only allows estimates of L70 values of 6 times the LM80 test. And the person acknowledges that, which is typically 10,000 hours. So how are manufacturers supposed to estimate an L70 up to 75,000 hours? That's one issue. So large, think about how to estimate to 75,000 hours depending on your data set. Related to that is, have you received samples of LEDs that have an L90 rating of 50,000 hours? So if you could touch base on those two, and we have a follow-up after that.
Okay, let me address the L70 first. I understand that the TM21 does not allow for that. There are many manufacturers that are providing lifetime claims at this time, greater than that. So where you're not able to use the TM21, the manufacturer has their own ways of extrapolating further when they know that their products have been tested that much. And some of the LEDs that are tested using LM80 are tested more than the usual 6,000 hours that is required. So there are certainly many methods that they can use, understanding the LM80 lifetime of the LED package itself, knowing what the temperature of that LED is at a certain level, and just using a reasonable approximation based on a similar approach as TM21 would be acceptable in reporting a lifetime of L70. And there was a question about L90 also, Michael?
Yeah, are you familiar with any 50,000 L90 products?
I don't know that I've identified any L90 products at this time. However, it is one of the optional reporting levels on the DLC, and I'd be happy to look into it. And we may have somebody from the DLC here that in the audience, if they can send that data to us where they have received that kind of data. But I'll take a look at the DLC database and see if anybody has actually reported on that particular metric, or see if it's even actual reporting point for their database. But personally, I have not seen that. But given an L70 of 75,000 hours, L90 of 50,000 hours would seem to be in line with how the LEDs are known to fade. Had we gone up any higher, like L95 or L98, you might get a situation where you're looking at a lot of thermal factors and early degradation that is a significant percentage, and that certainly would have probably been a lot shorter time. And where L90 is important to some people is in trying to maintain a more consistent light output. This is certainly one way that you could do it, is to say, look, I like my L90. I like to make sure that I have no more than 10% of light loss, similar to how the fluorescents behave. That's one way to go. But some manufacturers are offering things like constant lumen maintenance. And what that does is it actually has a feedback circuit that allows you to recognize how much light is coming out of the luminaire or the retrofit kit, and then increasing the current to the LEDs to maintain a consistent luminous flux output throughout the life of the luminaire or the retrofit kit. So those are other options that could be explored in a scenario where you want to absolutely maintain the initial light output. And I will say that there are trade-offs as you start driving LEDs harder. Your lifetime is one of the things that will get impacted. And was there another aspect to the L90?
No, I apologize. The question wasn't there. I do want to just elaborate on one of your comments. While I agree with you that some manufacturers maybe be extrapolating based on their extensive knowledge set of their own equipment, which they know their products better than anyone else, we have documented manufacturers who are claiming using both TM21 and LM80 data sets under a certain temperature of over 72,000 hours. So there are manufacturers who are and I going back to the other person's question, yes, TM21 does limit the extrapolation to 6 times the life. However, if the chip data is longer than that, then that could push it out. So if it's 12,000 hours of chip data and 6 times, that's 72,000 hours. So we are seeing some manufacturers out there. I'd also like to just clarify that some of these longer life requirements, this is not entirely being driven by us as a benchmark. We're hearing often from end users the desire for long life products. So this is keeping it consistent with the actual stuff we're seeing from end users who are ultimately going to be buying the product. They're asking for these long life requirements.
That's okay. In particular, that 6,000 hour, yes. If you have limitations on 6,000 hour chip testing, that will constrain you. But you're right. As you have higher number of hours that you tested your chip, the better your extrapolation and the better your TM21 method will be.
Moving into the retrofit process, I guess a question here is, how would the video work related to the guidance and support?
Okay, so let me scan down to that. So we're talking in particular just with respect to the video. So with respect to the video, I know that these retrofit kits don't necessarily ship with a CD or anything like that, but what we've seen is some of the manufacturers have on their website a video link. It may be a YouTube, as you can see here from Columbia Lighting. They have a YouTube video that shows somebody actually installing this. So those are certainly 2 ways to go about it. Put it directly on your website or create a YouTube channel where you can actually have some of these demonstration videos that show how your retrofit kits are installed, possibly in different ones. And again, this is optional guidance and support. I know that some manufacturers may choose not to do that, and this is not something that is required of the specification. But something that some better building members or others might ask for as something to guide them and help them with the process.
Great. We're just coming to the end of our questions, so if anyone has any last minute ones, feel free to send them through. This is a question and a combined statement here. Some of this has to do with rebates and also seems to be related to some of the terminology. Rebates seem to be product-driven and not custom retrofit-driven. That is the ultimate underlying statement here. The question here is, will the term kit and product be interchangeable? The light engine can be custom-sized and matched to a specific driver based on needs. So I guess ultimately, I think the person, this is me paraphrasing or understanding their question, they're ultimately talking about rebates related to not custom projects, but related to kind of off-the-shelf devices. And then they're asking about the term, the interchangeability of kit and product. Any thoughts there?
With respect to rebates, I really hate to speak on behalf of many efficiency organizations or utilities that have those rebates. And what I would like to say, though, is that on the Interior Lighting Campaign website, and I'll put the link up here again, there is a link to a database of incentives, rebates that are offered, and each one of them might be slightly different, and they're determined by the utility or the efficiency organization based on their specific requirements and what they're trying to achieve. With respect to what we're doing here, I guess I don't understand the portion of the question that talks about product or retrofit kit or kit, and I guess if that's related to the rebate question again, that's really something that needs to be specified by the utility or efficiency organization that has that rebate. You'd really have to read into that to make sure that you qualify, and some of the lighting designers or manufacturers might be able to help you out with understanding whether they've observed those rebates being given in the past, and whether you might qualify for those. So those are conversations that are best had with either the utility and the efficiency organization or with the manufacturer to get their experience in getting the rebates for their products. Did you have a different take on what the question was, Michael?
No, I agree with you, Felipe. It does seem to be more driven by the end program especially when you start getting to the specific words of interchangeability. And ultimately, I also agree with you that the incentive programs exist and they do a great job, but we can't get into either creating them or suggesting how they're crafted in terms of the specific terms, because they have to meet with their own often own regulators and other programs. So I think that was kind of a similar situation of my understanding it.
Great. And just to add to that, to the degree that we received some great feedbacks from some of the utility or efficiency organizations on the quick poll that we had about, would you be willing to offer some greater incentives to this? We'll see where the specification ends up, and maybe we'll reach out to some of those utilities and efficiency organizations to see if we can get some of the customers that are looking at these retrofit kits to have a better return on investment. I think we really like to help these retrofit kits, which provide for a better efficacy, for better controllability, to be used when you really have no choice with respect to saying, I really would like to have a luminaire, but I can't afford it, or I really have some other reasons that I can't just change out the whole luminaire. To say, well, you can have a plug-and-play T-LED that gives you some good energy savings, but you can also go with a retrofit kit. It gives you a little bit more flexibility in what you can do with that.
Coming up on really the final questions, just kind of reminder questions. First, where, the go kind of last pitch, where can they find the specification?
Great. So if you go to the Interior Lighting Campaign website, which is right here, there is a tab up at the top, and my mouse has decided to stop talking to me. This is very interesting. At the top of the page, there are a couple of drop-down boxes. There's a section that says "What's New" on the Interior Lighting Campaign. So I'll leave this page up for a little bit, and I'll put my contact information again so you can touch base with me. I'd be happy to also point you in the right direction. But in the Interior Lighting Campaign website, up at the top, there's a section that says "What's New." If you click on that, there'll be a drop-down box that says Retrofit Kit Specification, and that'll take you to the specification and provide you details on, it'll provide you the document, and it'll also provide you information on how to contact me. Also, on the front page of the Interior Lighting Campaign website, there's on the right-hand side, there's a box that says version 0.12 Retrofit Kit Specification. If you click on that, it'll also take you to the What's New page, Retrofit Kit Specification page.
And last call out for schedule. Comments are desired by?
Oh, I'm sorry. For comments and data or anything that you might have that can help us with the specification, please submit them by March 17th, 2017 to me. My email is shown on this slide, and my number is listed there, 509-372-6516.
Great. I'm going to end that ends our Q&A. At this point, I'm going to just circle back to a data point that I didn't have entirely in front of me when I started this question and answer. As I mentioned, the Better Building Summit is in the DC area. That's May 15th through 17th. And the specific end user of retail and food service manufacturer targeted meeting that I mentioned will occur on May 15th. So again, if you're interested in that, if you're a manufacturer or a possible end user, where you get to sit down and kind of say, well, here's our need, and this is being driven by the end users, DOE is just trying to help facilitate it. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to Felipe or myself or many other mechanisms, and we'll try to connect all the details there. At this point, we appreciate you attending, as well as deeply are interested in your thoughts and feedback and comments. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to hearing from you.